Okay, welcome. Our Sunday night little get together. Sorry we didn't have one last month. Also, a little bit of a summer respite here. Tonight, but we have a special topic of conversation, and it's going to be a conversation. Everybody, I'm sure, is still very interested in the topic around surrounding disclosure. Okay, everything that's going on down in Washington and swirling all over the place, and all the conversations that are taking place, and a lot of thoughts that are also swirling about this. So what I'm going to do, I actually have a document, but we can go into that a little later. I'm going to ask Bruce Pearson to say hi and jump right in and let him kick off the thing about disclosure, especially what's happening in Washington.
Well, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, or whenever you're following and watching this. Thanks, Stan, for joining with us. Joe, Joe and I were talking, and we've kind of come to this point, as Yogi Bear would say, if you find a fork in the road, take it. But I thought it might be helpful to discuss, step back and take a look at the macro picture, take a step back, take a breather, and take a look at the big picture of where this in the broadest sense, this area of interest in investigation and research, um, where we're at right now, what has changed, where we might be going, some of the observations I've made, and they may be valid or not, but we hear more and more discussion in the channels and the outlets and on the shows of people that are involved in this that uh, there's been a growing interest in breaking down the silos between UFO technology and research and paranormal and Bigfoot and multiverse and uh, emerging physics and so forth. I'm wondering whether that is or is not true, or maybe that's a false observation on my part. But also, it's interesting that as we got into a much greater, um, by default or by design, increase in the amount of disclosure, whether it's overt or covert, or whether it's by the fact that technology is out there and everybody has a cell phone and everybody is a little bit more in tune to it. Then COVID came along and kind of stole the show worldwide. These are my observations, so feel free to disagree and jump in and discuss this. But um, I think we are starting to see begrudgingly, and I don't think it's open and acknowledged, but a greater amount of disclosure is happening by default. And I think that it's partly if you will, the axiom that it's kind of hard to put the genie back in the bottle. It was one thing to take black and white photos with the 35 millimeter camera and Instamatic, uh, and try to get some documentation that way when we had very little intercommunication between interested parties. And now, when everybody has high def cameras as well as HD video available, and the dissemination of this information is immediate. The other side of that coin is, and it's a whole nother discussion, but with the advent of AI and far beyond Photoshop and photo manipulation, it's going to be even harder and harder to discern if you don't know the provenance of any piece of uh, data or any evidence, whether it's valid or not, whether it's been faked or not. Um, that's not an inconsequential aspect that we're going to face to a much greater degree as time goes on. But that being said, we have shows if for example, Skinwalker Ranch, and we're going to talk about Bob Bigelow. The government was involved in that for 20 years and walked away from it. I don't know why, but the word is that just Bigelow burned out on spending the money to try to continue to figure out what was going on there. I find that hard to believe, but I think that the relevant information that's coming out week after week on that show blows my mind as a documentary producer that It is so well produced, so evidence based, and so remarkable in what it's uncovering that I think it's one of the more important shows that I've seen in the last 20 years. Um, Talking about the vortex and talking about how all of the disparate paranormal pieces of evidence kind of all come together on that property. And I think that that is kind of like a bellwether or a thumbnail of what I'm talking about, that maybe there isn't strict lines of demarcation between nuts and bolts UFOs and what's going on at CERN and what people are saying seeing in the realm of paranormal investigations. And so without me going on way far afield, I would also only like to say with regard to technology that what I'm seeing, and there must be 50 paranormal investigation shows on now. They can't even come up with names of them. There's so many. Some of them are real, are a joke, but some of them are fascinating because of the technology they're using. Equipment that I originally was very skeptical as a broadcast engineer to even consider. I'm not, I know a couple people that manufacture these devices. For example, this voice box, this ghost box, and it's a wide range of items. That's ridiculous. And either they're building a memory in it or they, had a feedback loop or something. Knowing two of the people that build them and knowing the background of it, I'm not so sure that there's not something to it. Can I explain it? Not really, but they have a device that does stick figures now based on laser or computer evidence driven by EMF in a room. That may or may not be, it's hard unless you've really looked into the equipment to see if there's any validity to it. But I have to tell you, some of the shows are pretty compelling, and I have personally worked. Go ahead, Joe.
Oh,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
going to say, well, we're going to stay on focus, and this is a conversation tonight. And so Bruce did an excellent job of kicking it off. Now, what I'd like to
But
do,
I'll mute.
I'd like to share a document. Yeah, right. I'd like to share a document right now. Now, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, now this is a document that was done by somebody in academia, and they did a nice job of compiling a database, basically. And it's a data dump is actually what it is. And it is covering, as you can see, the title of it is on the AAWSAP, AATIP confusion. Now, these are two government sponsored efforts. One deals with the paranormal, that's the AAWSPAP. The other one, the AATIP, is actually a renaming of another acronym, but this one deals with the UAP phenomena. Okay, especially these are very important post the effort that Congress and the Senate has on opening up the investigations of what the UAP phenomena consists of. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and I'm going to send off a listing of information. There's a lot of conceptions and maybe misconceptions about what we should be looking for as far as the releasing of pertinent data. Okay. Now, so much of this has a lot to do. It's swirling down there in Washington. Some are pushing a lot of hoax type of stuff or refuting that UAP. That there's an alien presence and all of this. There's other side that is pushing that there is some type of phenomenon that is not of this earth. But all this, that as I scroll down, you're going to see some links. Okay. And they all have been doing sufficient amount of work trying to identify those areas of the topic that shed a little bit more light and maybe some validity to the whole thing. Okay. So instead of we get blurbs of one aspect and that is pushed as being gospel. Okay. But here, what you're going to see is that there are a lot of different areas, and this has all been compiled as an academic study to try to get to the source of what the issue really is. Now, I'm going to scroll down a little bit more. Okay, just to give you a sense, NIDS, of course, that was the Bigelow effort. And it goes into great detail about what was actually done during the period of time on Skinwalker Ranch, for instance, that Bruce mentioned early on, as to what he was looking for, why he may have been doing it, and what the net outcome is. Okay, and it's not exactly all altruistic. There's always money involved in these things. Okay, so you'll see John Alexander, Colm Kelleher, um, a lot of interesting data. Here it is down about Bigelow. Okay, again, I'm not going to read this, but I'm just going to give you kind of an overview of what we're going to have a conversation about. Okay, now I'm going to give it back to Bruce. Bruce, let me see if I can share this and you can go through it maybe. Would you like to do that?
Yeah, and I'll try to stay closer to the topic. You know, when you look at NIDS and Colm Kelleher, who was, I guess, the director for Bigelow. I think all of us, if we're familiar with these personalities, John Alexander is an interesting individual. He actually was out. Fugel had him out to Skinwalker now recently to talk about what he observed when he was out there. I think the team they have together is top notch. I think they do a very responsible job. It's interesting that Travis, who was brought on as the scientist of the team, was also under contract and under non-disclosure, as it turned out here just recently with the government, and that ruffled some feathers on the team that's doing the investigations now. But I think that they also understood the realities of what you're under when you're working for the government. This was an ongoing project for almost 2 decades out there. And as Joe alluded to, it's seldom for strictly altruistic endeavors with a government involved process like this. George Knapp broke this story to a great extent, as well as Bob Lazar. He was the first one to interview Bob Lazar. Whether you add any credibility or to put any credibility in Bob's story or not. So OSAP and ATIP, although they were two different programs, they worked hand in glove for the government. And I would like to get a sense of what the folks that are with us tonight, their familiarization with, or how familiar they are with Skinwalker Ranch, and what their take is, if they've been watching the program, or if they know anything from back in the Bigelow days, or what's been disclosed or released subsequent to that. And certainly the rancher that had the property for a short period of time, that was growing or was raising steers there, and some of his evidence and some of his incidents that took place. So I'll open it up to you folks and try to get a sense of where we are together as far as familiarity with this, and then we can go on.
Yeah, and before I'd like to acknowledge a couple of the people I didn't say hi to. Mindy, welcome. Glad to see you here. Also, Bill Weber, an old schoolmate of mine. How you doing, Bill? Bill was also head of the Delaware MUFON, and he was also a regional director, I believe, of Pennsylvania. Correct, Bill? You can unmute yourself. Okay.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you 5x5.
Okay. Yeah, there was some reorganization in the state of Pennsylvania. And at that time, I was the chief investigator, and I was then asked to take over the state as the state director for PA, and did that for a bit. And then I was approached by the international director, and he says there's no coverage down in Delaware. So he said, would you want to do Delaware? So I said, okay, I'll do Delaware, but to do that, I would want to step down from Pennsylvania. So that's what I did. and I recommended John Doucette, who's the state director for PA, and then I took over as state director for Delaware. When I first started down there, there was only two people, myself and another investigator, and grew that to around 45 people then. But I am no longer with MUFON now, so I had to step back and wanted to do my own research, and to that end, I wrote a book that I just released about 2 weeks ago. It's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble right now. So we'll talk about that later.
Congratulations. We'll have to plug it again before the thing's over.
Well, I'll show you what it looks like
Okay.
if it doesn't come in backwards.
Nope, looking good. UFOs, sightings, reports, and cover-ups.
Yep.
Okay.
That talks about some of the cases I've been involved with and some other historic cases as well. And then, of course, the government cover-ups that follow along with it. So, yeah, I wanted to sit in on your meeting to get up to speed on what's currently going on, because I've not been with MUFON for a while, but I like to stay in touch.
Well, we're glad you did, Bill.
Thank
Two
you.
things before we get back on track with the original conversation. Also, William Alec, hello to you too. Bill, can you hear me? William Alec, greetings. Greetings and salutations.
His microphone is turned off.
Okay, well, I'll wave to you then. Okay. All right, now also, Bill Weber.
Sir.
You see the map with the stars behind me?
Yeah.
Recognize the area?
Yeah, you're coming in a little. I have to blow you up
Okay.
if I can.
Okay, specifically, there's the Navy Pier.
Oh yeah, Jersey.
And also, you know what the stars represent?
Sightings?
No, well, there was a landing in Port Monmouth, 1970. Photographed in the Courier. You know, remember the Courier, right?
Yes.
Okay. There was also the Nike New York 53, the Nike site that blew up on the Navy Road.
Yeah, right down the street from my high school.
Yep,
Our high school.
May 22nd, 1958.
Yeah.
There is the Nike Hercules site where we had 24 nuclear-armed Nike Hercules anti-aircraft missiles. That also the only time in a 6-year period that they armed those missiles for flight in anger. That means the warheads were fully armed and ready to go. Was the same time of the landing at Port Monmouth.
Yeah, nothing about Earl though.
Well, no, it's all about Earl.
But you know what I mean. That was
all
the base.
all the nuclear weapons that they moved there over the years.
Right.
That's where I had my sighting in Cold Snack.
Yep. Yeah, I lived up in Monmouth County.
Right. Yep.
Yep.
Bill graduated. We graduated from the same high school. So anyway,
1 year apart.
Okay, I'm going to get us back on track. Okay, Bruce asked the question of the group. Who would like to kick in their thoughts on the disclosure, specifically the disclosure that's coming out of Washington? Who wants to stand up and raise your hand?
I comment about that in my book. Those 3 persons that came forward
Okay.
to Congress, and essentially, let me see. The denial still continues with the government. Basically, they say, and I'm going to read it to you if I can. To date, AARO has not discovered any empirical evidence that any sighting of a UAP represent off-world technology or the existence of a classified program that has not been properly reported to Congress. So again, here's the denial.
Yep.
And that's current. That's like now.
Yeah. I think they're blowing a lot of smoke at us.
They always do.
Yep. Who else has a thought on this? Stan, do you have a thought on it?
Actually, I'm kind of like the transfer over to Skinwalker Ranch. I've been following that quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of the information that was gathered there was kept secret, because why share it? There's no point in it. And with the new group there, I think it's changing just a bit because the media has changed quite a bit. We're in more locations and we're out there with a computer. Before we didn't have one. So I think there is actually a vortex there. And I think we know quite a bit about it. And is it being reported entirely? Of course not. It's a show and it needs episodes. And the episodes are followed with advertisers. So they'll release so much, but once again, will everything ever be released? Of course not. But I think the other thing we have the option of doing, there are other ways of finding it. A lot of people come up with shows on Gaia and Amazon Prime. That's where I get my information from, and it's 2024. It's not dating back a couple of years, it's today. And the other thing I found very interesting also, I mean, how many shows have we seen on Bigfoot? I mean, countless. There was one group who actually, a whole group went out hunting, just not for him. All of a sudden they saw a Bigfoot, and all of a sudden it turned into an orb and disappeared. What does that tell you? So regarding disclosure and things of that nature, I think from Washington's standpoint, it doesn't get them many stars. What's the point? And we we have like 50 states. I mean, everybody is a little different in each location, if you know what I mean. Some people care, some people don't. We have a small little group here is interested in it, but overall, most people don't. So I think our group is a little more focused. And I saw another report from Brazil. It was a nice documentary. Crashed. Military showed up, of course, but some of the aliens were found hiding, and they looked like we thought they would look. So they're out there. To what extent? Really don't know. If we needed to know more, they would show up. But from our standpoint, I think we just have to gather what we could gather when we find it. And Skinwalker Ranch, I would give them a lot of credit. They spent a lot of time in it, and hopefully it'll keep on going.
They're here. Mindy, you're awfully quiet. Why didn't you weigh in?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I've been following Skinwalker Ranch also. I find it fascinating. It's absolutely amazing. The technology and the team that they have there is fabulous. I think with Bigelow, I think he went into Bigelow Aerospace Company he formed so that he can, hide all the information that he has under proprietary rules and things. So I think that's been the tendency of government anyway, to put everything in the private sector so that they are exempt from Freedom of Information Act inquiries. So I'm not surprised that that's the natural progression that he followed. But it would be good if somebody from his team could offer more insight to help the current team. There should be some better, liaison stuff. Like John Alexander showed up and that was good, but there could be more of that going on, I think.
Yeah, yep. Bruce, you want to answer? You have anything to add to Mindy's thoughts on this?
Sorry, it's a little slow on switching. Yeah, I think they're all very good points, and it's funny because Stan brings up a good point. I've been on a number of these investigative shows over the years, and people constantly ask me, "Is that stuff real or is it faked?" Well, first of all, you can't make a blanket, a blanket statement about anything is unreasonable and inaccurate. Some of them are good, some of them are not so good, and they're all subject to errors made by human beings if you don't have empirical evidence to go on. However, Stan brings up a very good point, and we need to always keep this in mind. And I tell people this when they ask me that question. I get it all the time. Every week I get asked by somebody about this. These shows are meant to entertain. They're meant to get sponsors. They're meant to make money. There are some of them that are actually true hardcore documentaries. So the two are not, diametrically opposed. You can have a good hardcore investigative documentary for the right reasons. It's not meant to dramatize or exploit a particular point of view and still get sponsors. And so that's not necessarily exclusive one way or the other. But you have to keep in mind that, why have we had how many seasons of, The Secret of Oak Island? And that just keeps churning on. That doesn't mean it's not valid what's been going on up there, but they spent enough money just to bulldoze the whole island down, put a cofferdam around it, and go down to 500 feet and sift every inch of dirt there is in there. But that being said, they spent the brothers have spent a whole lot of money on that, and I think they've come up with some interesting theories. Let's go back to what we're talking about. When I went through public relations school with the military, it was all services, and the lie and deny protocol is exemplary of the fact that there is really no benefit for government to ever admit anything with regard to this. What's in it for them other than ridicule, and the admission that they have either been lying through their teeth to us, which we know for a fact. I mean, you can't go through the litany, the chronological litany of the Roswell history without, well, yeah, it happened, it didn't happen. It was weather balloons, it was, crash test dummies, it was, mogul, it was, and goes on, case closed, blah, 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 blah. All the records are gone. So this is a perfect example of the fact that they will never really disclose, because there's absolutely no positive aspect to this, and there's a lot of possibility. If you go back to the Rand report, where 50 years ago, 60 years ago, they said, well, listen, society will become unhinged if you ever admit any of this type of stuff. So whether it is or it isn't, you're not going to talk about it. Not to mention, we just keep going with that $1 trillion defense budget, and if they admit that there's stuff coming in and going that they don't even have any idea of what it is, that kind of pokes a hole into the additional expense for the. So we've all heard these arguments. I think that it is remarkably different. I started literally in '77 down in Roswell as an anchorman when I was 21 years old, and got involved in investigative documentary work pretty much at that time, and then had an incident up at Cannon Air Force Base, which has never really been discussed or covered, although it was widely covered in the media. And from those days to now, the change in the atmosphere and the attitude in the general public is nothing short of remarkable. I think that the real world we live in, and Stan, you bring up another good point. There's not a lot of people that are interested in this. You talk about the latest, score at a football game, and they're all over it, and that's fine. But there's not a lot of people that are passionate in relation to the total population. Although there's a whole hell of a lot more people that are interested in it now than there were even 10 years ago, greatly due to the media change and the exposure. And, we don't hear quite as much X-File music every time a story comes up as we used to. I missed all those college courses in broadcast journalism, which is, I have my degree in that, where they told you how to, snicker and make the smart remarks and play the X-Files wasn't out back then. But so I think there have been major changes in the landscape, and identifiable and objective changes in what's being delivered. Obviously, congressional hearings. We go back to say what you will about Stephen Greer, but the original Disclosure Project, our friend George Filer was on there. A lot of people that, are very serious researchers appeared on there at the National Press Club, and it hardly got a wink from, even though the world's media was there. So now we got Grush and his people in there. We've got Lou Elizondo. We've got To the Stars Academy. So there is a lot going on that never happened before. I just think that the real world and all the nonsense that's going on in the real world in other areas is probably overshadowing it for the bulk of the populace, because either they're distracted or they're interested in something else, or they're concerned about how the world's coming off the rails. I don't know if any of you agree with that, but there are a number of, and I listen continuously and do research. I listen to podcasts. I listen to radio shows. I read whatever I can. I watch a number of these shows whenever I have a moment and have time, and usually on in the background. And there is a great volume of well-produced and credible shows. Once again, as Stan related to, on some of the alternate channels. You know, the Roku channel carries a lot of interesting stuff. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Y-Files that this guy does. Very, I think, very well done, and they got a humorous side to them too, with the goldfish and stuff. But he does some pretty well detailed overviews of a lot of unexplained phenomena, and I think it's that, and he's got a million viewers, and now he's actually got a television show on. I don't know if it was on Pluto TV or on one of the channels. So the fact that we have opened up a lot of niche broadcast outlets serves getting the product out there in front of people. Now, there's good, as I said, there's good and there's bad. But anybody have any comments on that? Do you think I'm off base on that?
Before, I'd like to, first of all, John Ventry, welcome aboard.
Yeah, thanks.
Got here a little late.
I'm getting up to get a bottle of water. Coming right back.
Okay. All right. Anyway, yeah, Bruce brought up some good
Comment if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Comment if I may.
1 minute. Going to time him?
Yeah.
Okay,
Real quick.
Uh-huh.
To expand on what Bruce was saying, essentially for years we've been preconditioned with movies and stuff coming out of Hollywood, you know, Close Encounters and District 9 and the Day the Earth Stood Still, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we're being preconditioned so that it's not going to result in a situation that the War of the Worlds, where the Martians landed in New Jersey and people were jumping off roofs and stuff because of it in panic. So by slowly leaking or preconditioning us to the fact that this stuff could be real, and then also in the very beginnings of stuff, if people came forward and they said, "Hey, I saw something in the sky," and of course they were ridiculed, shot down. In some cases, they lost their jobs and stuff. So a lot of people were holding back from saying or see that anything that they saw. And then, of course, you had all of the government programs all the way up to and including Project Blue Book, the Condon Report, and everything that was telling everybody that they're crazy. It's swamp gas and so on. But then Hynek flipped and says, well, with the number of reports coming in, there's going to be something to this, okay? And then finally, today, in today's environment, everybody out there has cell phones, okay? And their cell phones have some pretty decent cameras on it. So if you have 5 people coming across saying, I saw something, and they could easily be shot down. But if you got 500,000 people saying, I've got stuff on my cell phone, okay, that's pretty hard to deny.
Yeah, very, very good, very good. Yeah, John, we're discussing disclosure based upon what's coming out of Washington, and so now we're kind of tearing it apart and looking at it from as many different ways as possible. What are your thoughts?
I can make a comment.
Disclosure?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, as far as the ridicule factor, when I ran for county commissioner here in 2019, I sent my press release in, and they immediately changed the title of it to local head of a UFO organization running for commissioner. Well, that wasn't in my press release, right? So
yeah.
When I ran for governor, that was 5 years ago. When I ran for governor 3 years ago, the same newspaper did the same thing, put it in the opening line that I'm running for governor, former head of a UFO organization, right? So, but it really didn't come up. You know, other newspapers would read that because it was the first press release out. They mentioned it. After the first or second debate, they no longer mentioned UFOs. I ran for county commissioner again last year. I spoke to that reporter and I said, if you got a problem with UFOs, take it up with the Pentagon. And he said to me, yeah, it's amazing how quickly that flipped around. Never said a word. So, you know, for all their lies, and it is all lies, they've made it acceptable now and we're not being, I don't think we're being criticized. And I got proof of it in the political arena where they'll tear you apart for any little thing. Didn't come up last year running for commissioner, but I don't believe a word that Rush, Elizondo, they're all paid actors. I don't believe it one bit.
Yeah, it's definitely, and I think further along we go, more of that comes out. I mean, the thought that we're going, like I said, my line of demarcation is when they start releasing thousands of valid military related reports that have been compiled over the years. And I know I was told from somebody from ONI, they were getting thousands of reports every year. This is back in 1970. That, just from U.S. military ships and aircraft. So when they start doing that, then I'll start standing up and paying attention.
Joe, I am a firm believer right now that we back engineered the crash in the Black Forest in 1936. I've been saying this for years, and the new book I wrote, They Are Us, that's the premise. We back engineered it. Roswell was our trying to replicate the Haunebu. It crashed. The UFO encounter, I think, is rare. Most of what's been seen, I believe, is ours. So the military can release all the reports they want. It's no different than Tic Tac. Those are ours. I believe those are ours. When you show me an alien, or you show one of their craft comes up and they make contact, I'm going to believe the government. Otherwise, I don't believe a thing the word the government says. I believe that 1936 UFO crash that the Nazis got, Hitler got, didn't know what to do with it. And that started all of their technology through Operation Paperclip. I believe that was real.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. William Alec, you have any thoughts on this? You were very quiet tonight.
Can you hear me?
5 by 5.
Okay. Well, my part in all this is first of all, I'm not a UFO expert. My wife is. My wife is a UFO contactee expert. She lectured on this subject. I think for how long?
30 years.
30 years. So that makes her an expert.
Put her on.
And
Put her on.
Yeah, bring her in.
She's a contactee with what's called the Galactic Federation. Okay. And so this federation surrounds the planet in guardian action. Okay. So they're very involved in human activities here. And that's pretty much all that I know about it. Me, I'm into the technology of these so-called UFOs. Okay. And one guy that I know of, chances are you probably all heard of him, Jack Sarfati.
Sure.
I guess
he's been on our show a couple of times. He
mentioned something on the internet the other day, some classified material that the UFO phenomena, they just don't understand it. If you look at these people at EG&G, like Bob Lazar, and these guys, they don't understand the technology. Okay. But see, I went to a Tom Bearden conference a number of years ago, back in '97. And basically 2 words came out of this, okay? Pay attention, okay, to what this guy is talking about, okay? Because he's got it nailed. Now, he passed away a number of years ago. And it took me a long time to figure out what this guy was talking about in his lectures, because you'll find his lectures on the internet, but he doesn't really disclose everything. So I had to, over the past 20 years here, and now I'm lecturing at conferences, And I got a lecture coming up next January with Spacecom. I applied for, so I'm going to see if they're gonna let me present. And it's mainly this Tom Bearden's lectures, but I had to come along and fill in all the blanks because Tom deliberately left out, a fair amount of material. And one of them is, of course, what these UFOs, what their technology is. And first of all, it's really not that complicated. Okay. The UFO technology isn't that complicated. A lot of it was presented in Star Trek, but it's the original Star Trek is what you have to look at. Because there you talk about warp drive. Well, warp drive is for real. Okay, the technology behind it is for real. Now, of course, they don't go into a lot of detail of what they're doing. But over the years here, a number of physicists have come forward and presented their concepts behind a warp drive engine. Okay. And so, and then if you look at anti-gravity, and that's an area that Tom Bearden touched on. What is this anti-gravity? Well, it's gravity that's working in opposite of gravity. Okay, well, what's opposite? Well, it's time reversed. Okay, it's time reversed technology. And the phenomena occurs, it does occur naturally in physics. They don't see it was in the physics papers 150 years ago. We would have had
theory of general
this technology 150 years ago. Okay, but they took it out.
Jack Sarfati has been working on that. It's time and space. Okay, so the warping of space and time is something that has been proven through physics. And you don't even have to exceed the speed of light in order to seem like you're going faster than the speed of light. And that's kind of what Sarfati's been working on. And that's what he's been trying to promote, how that works. Low power physics. What we're talking about is low power. And they're also using metamaterial for the craft with special problems.
Yeah, it's a quasi crystal. What it does.
Crystalline matrix, right?
Yeah, you see what we're working with is this time reverse. Okay, you got a time reverse gravity, which gives you anti-gravity. And the way that works, it was in the physics books 150 years ago. They took it out. Okay, this guy by the name of Oliver Heaviside and Tom Bearden gave a whole presentation on this, that they took it out of the books because you're working with something called the zero vector. Okay, this is what happens when you set up two magnetic fields and they converge in a convergence configuration. And what these fields do is that they go like this. Okay, there's something called the Z axis.
Yeah, William, can I interrupt you here a bit? First
Sure.
of all, I'd like to have you on a future show, and what we'll do, we'll spend the whole show working on the physics of propulsion and the fast the FTL, so to speak, faster light, propulsion.
Yeah, warp drives.
But right now, I'd like to kind of stay on track with the topic of conversation that we started with, and that's the disclosure. But thank you. I mean, you've opened up a great area. Matter of fact, maybe we'll get
some
Jack Sarfati
disclosure.
on us. We'll get Jack on again too. He's a good guest. He's a good guest. Okay, what I'd like to do, Bruce, you want to take us back on track, get us on track, and then we'll open it up again to the conversation. How is that?
That sounds great, and I think that we should talk about the scalar and antigravitics, because that's certainly very relevant to what this whole area of interest. I appreciate hearing about that. Yeah, John, you made a very strong statement that you didn't believe anything the government said, that Rush and all the rest of the testimony was baloney. So so is it your view that the statements that they made in front of Congress had no relevance? The fact that, he basically said he had evidence and personal evidence of, recovered craft and occupants. So I'd be interested to have you elaborate on why you dismiss all that or feel that that's not relevant at all.
Yeah. Well, it's so typical of Project Blue Book 2.0 and the Robertson Panel 2.0 that they tell you about all this, but they don't ever bring it forward. It's like when the when the Republican Party here sued me last year to get me off the ballot, they claimed 4 years ago you filed your financials with the county, but they didn't bring it forward to prove it. I said, well, if I actually did that, you would have brought it forward, but you don't have it, do you? So I can tell you, I analyzed this thing since 2017 with Tom DeLong, even further back, the whole way, and it's in my book, the whole way the funding of MUFON came out through Bigelow, and then years later we find out it was, it was done through the Speaker of the House and the government, and Schuessler knew about it. And you bring a rock star in, how do we get the young people involved? Well, who do we bring in? John Denver? No, you bring in a rock star. I don't even know if John Denver's alive. He might not even be alive. I don't think he is. So you bring a rock star in, get the young people. The whole thing was orchestrated. Then they try to sell stock. They take in $3 million in sales and they spend $32 million, go out of business, AKA NICAP. And then Bigelow gets jealous and he has to come out on 60 Minutes with a statement that there's an alien presence here and I've seen it. Well, bring it forward. They don't. I believe this whole thing is a cover story for our secret space force, which has been here since 1945 when we tested the technology we got on Project Paperclip. And I tell you, I really go into detail in my book of why I don't believe anything that these people say. And all the people involved, a lot of the people involved with Academy of the Stars, they're all of the people from Bigelow, from NIDS, from every other group he had. It's the people he trusts. Even Sarfati, I think he's part of that group too. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know a lot about him. I need to, where's the beef? I want to see the proof. And the only proof for me is going to be some real alien part, not something we created and said, oh, we got this from an alien, but I want to see the alien, meet them, something. I'm not believing a word they say because the way they rolled this out, it's all BS. It is. And Grush, yep. I've seen bodies. Yep. I was trained in behavioral analysis, body language. I trained people to interview, interrogate. I don't believe a thing that guy said. He was just a player that the government put there. Don't worry, we're not going to prosecute you for lying to Congress. That's what it was.
Yeah, I tend to agree with just about all that John said. Without the evidence, it's just anecdotal. And also, if you think about it, if you put a little bit of truth out in order to get a big lie out there or to take pressure off. And that's what I think this whole thing is about. I find very little that's compelling. And even to the point where Bigelow's whole thing, he has government contracts.
Yep.
And he can actually store whatever he wants, and he's exempt from FOIA. So even if he had a whole spacecraft sitting in his warehouse down there in Las Vegas, he's exempt from having to disclose it. As are all the contractors, your Lockheed Martins, your Raytheons, all of them are exempt from FOIA. And then if you want to hide something, if the government wants to hide something, all they do is store it with the contractor, because that's the chink in the law.
Yeah, well, that's why they moved. There was something that we used to take reports. can't remember what it was, over in Colorado Springs or something. They did something and moved it to NATO, so there's no foyers on that. But remember how, if you remember the history, UFO encounters were on a 5-year cycle, the big cases. You know, it was 1942, Battle of LA, 47, Roswell, 52 over the White House, right? 57, I remember there were big cases. It was like every 5 years you had something. And that's what I think it probably is. You know, maybe it's a 2.5 year round trip, you know, 2 years, 2.5 years each way. And then it becomes like, I laugh when I see the MUFON report every month. There were 671 sightings. There were 57 landings and 16 creatures. Really? I don't think so.
Here, show me the evidence.
They never do.
Anyway, now I know Bruce feels differently about it.
Well,
let's poll everybody.
yeah, let's see what other folks want to say.
Okay, Stanley, what do you believe? Do you believe it's BS, or do you believe they're actually doing the right thing?
Actually, being part of the media, I look into things, and quite often you'll find a real good documentary. And the one I talked about briefly before is the one in Brazil. Whereas it landed, it crashed, they saw it come down. People like you and I went to take a look at it, and they picked up a piece of the UFO. They were able to crunch it, and as soon as you let it go, went back to normal. So we're basing it on our reality, what we're trying to do. The UFO's reality is a little different than ours, which we don't understand. So where do we go from here? Their reality, our reality. They land, they crash, we can see what they can do with their product. We can't duplicate it. So where's our argument? There is none. You take it, you look at it, you understand it, then you just let it go.
Okay. All right. Bill Weber, what do you think?
Well, we do have memory metal now that will heal itself. The artifacts that were recovered from Roswell was given out to private industry to shield it from FOIA requests. And Battel's been playing around with it. They've came out with some material they call nitinol, which is pretty valuable material. And of course, AT&T Bell Labs came out with the transistor. Texas Instrument came out with the integrated circuit. Corning came out with the fiber optics. It's all been hidden away and under trademark protection. But again, the stuff that we're using, some of it now, like I believe the TR3A, TR3B have been around a long time, but TR3B now is allegedly anti-gravity, perhaps using spinning mercury.
Which the Germans experimented with back during World War II.
Oh yeah, sure. That's, that's the Glocke, the bell. Mm-hmm. And I speak about that in my book. I speak about the technologies that we started with. Remember way back when people were using calculators and adding machines, and they were slow and cumbersome and stuff. And then there was a company I remember, Frieden Flexowriter. I don't know if anybody remembers those. Was a high whiz bang calculator. But soon after that, Sperry came out with the ENIAC, which sped things up. And then also with they were using vacuum tubes and relays, which is a heck of a lot faster than a calculator. So again, thermionic emission versus solid state technology is night and day. But just the advances in the computers, take a look like from 1940s up to today, where you have computers that can do 1 × 10⁸ calculations per second. And they go very, very fast, but they require a little bit of cooling, like 600 gallons of water just to keep them cool. And that computer, that's called the Frontier, and that's over in Oak Ridge, Tennessee right now. So I believe that we have gathered material and technology from our space brothers. We have come up and tried to duplicate things. Canada and the U.S. with the flying craft, and then of course, like John indicated with the crash in the Black Forest, they worked hand in hand with some psychics because they were very much into the occult, the Nazis, and they supposedly retrieved plans from the Aryan Society over at the Aldebaran star system. And that information was coupled with what they came out with from the retrieval, and they created the first craft, which was the Hannibal. And it's been alleged that this is what the Allied pilots saw flying around that they referred to as Foo Fighters. So these things have been around a while. A lot of people have been seeing it, but again, it's all under, maybe the government just doesn't want to come forward and open up the kimono 100% for fear of showing our enemies what we have. But again, I don't think we have a monopoly on the aliens, if you would. I think that our enemies also have recovered material, and God knows what they have.
Well, right now it's said that we only know about what's 50 years behind where we're actually at. So the things that are flying in our space may have little or nothing to do with an alien presence.
But didn't have China show that they had an F-117 in their possession?
That was the one that was shot down in Yugoslavia.
Right. Don't you think they combed all over that thing?
Oh, absolutely. And they've improved upon everything that they found too.
Of course.
Anyway, Mindy, what do you think?
Well, I think that what's going on in Antarctica might be even more significant. And maybe this Skinwalker Ranch stuff is a diversion to keep us away from what's actually going on in Antarctica.
Antarctica is definitely interesting, without a doubt. Yep.
Makes you wonder why they went down there with a battle group, to set up, quote, Little America.
Yeah, Byrd.
Yeah, Admiral Byrd.
Well, they were looking for the Nazi base that was there in the ice tunnels and any other technology that was left behind. I think that's what they went to find. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And that's supposedly where the Hannibal and the Vril series saucers came out of, the Antarctica.
Yeah, you know what I think might be a good question, though, is how many crashes do you think are real? I think the Black Forest is real. I think all the ones after that, especially in the 40s and 50s, are a testing of the technology. But do you really think, I think there's like 36 documented UFO crashes. Do you really think they fly, 500 billion miles and then crash? How many crashes do you think? Because if they've seen the bodies and they got some the craft, well, how many? I say the Black Forest, absolutely. Maybe one other. I just don't see 36 crashes or whatever, the folklore says. I don't think that's possible. And I think it's been a slow back engineering through the years. Everything you said, Bill, came from Project Paperclip. I don't think it,
Okay, good point. But there's actually a common ground there. And I'm going to ask Bruce in a second to kind of go into detail. First of all, down in New Mexico, in addition to all the green meteors that they had going through around 1950 to 55 or whenever.
I can tell you what that was.
Well, the interesting thing is White Sands. You mentioned Project Paperclip, of course. Von Braun and Willie Lee and all of them were down there at White Sands, bring us into the space age, if you will. But also down there, the use of radar. Now, radar is an interesting thing. It was actually developed here in Fort Monmouth, the Camp Evans part of Fort Monmouth, which was also part of the Manhattan Project. And that's also where the fuse mechanisms for the atomic bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were designed and built. Now, the thing about radar, and there were a lot of supposed effects that the electromagnetic radiation, the microwave radiation that they were using, was supposedly causing some problems. And this is according to Corso. Corso actually ran a battalion, a Nike Ajax battalion, down at Red Canyon, which is now part of the McGregor Range, which was where they trained and tested. Now, apparently the story, and I'm going to ask to turn it over to Bruce here, where the radars, I believe, were turned off, weren't they, Bruce? They were requested to be turned off. And then,
Yeah, the documentation has come through that, say what you will about the validity of it or not. It is an interesting coincidence that there were periods when the radar was told not to be operated. They were instructed not to operate the radar. The, I think the points that have been brought up by everyone are very valid and due consideration. But I would, going back to our original concept of why we're having this, taking the big view, I think that we have to look at the reality of the real world and money and greed. And I think if we step back and go back and review the last couple of years with our friends in the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab and what the plan is, I think you can be considered very cynical, but I think it can be well documented that why do we not implement this technology to be the king of the hill as far as defense and military? Because quite frankly, General Dynamics and AM General and all the rest of them are very happy to make money off conventional warfare, as illustrated in the continuing wars that we have all over the planet, at all times. I think that also John is absolutely right, and I think the government has. You couldn't swing a cat and not find a false information, deception. One of the techniques that's been acknowledged by the CIA is put a little bit of truth in and put whatever you want as far as disinformation in, and throw a little bone and a crumb of valid documentation or information out, and then you can run the spin off of that. The fact that, and I think Stanley will agree with me. I think we all know this. It's no miracle. The media now is so pathetically controlled, and I don't care which side of the spectrum you're on, that it is the vestiges of independent journalism and investigation in traditional media is all but gone. And I think that a real problem is, and not to get too far afield, but I think that all of this connects, if you will, and that is we do not teach young people in our school systems much of anything, but we certainly don't teach critical thinking and discernment. And I think in an area where virtually everybody under the age of 40 is hooked on sticking their face in the screen in front of them on their phone and accepts that as gospel, whatever they see on TikTok or Twitter or Facebook, we run the risk of losing the ability to discern what's truthful and what isn't, what is manipulated, what is not. It's a very, very tough marketplace to determine what you should believe and what you should believe. If you don't know the provenance of a piece of video or audio or a statement made by someone, I would question, I would agree with John, it's tough to not believe everything is falsified. By the same token, the fact that normal, reasonable people without an agenda, as Stanley said, could go out and pick up documents, evidence, if you will, video, audio, and look at these pieces of evidence directly themselves. And if look at the Phoenix Lights, they certainly weren't flares. They do a pretty pathetic job of covering themselves. But the lie and deny paradigm that the government uses really is designed to make everybody shrug their shoulders and say, well, we know they're lying through their teeth. And it goes no further than that. John brings up a good point. All right, and so do you, Joe. All right, let's bring the junk out. Unload the dump truck. Let's take a look at this stuff. If it is as Grush says, so on and so forth. I don't think there's ever a reason for them to do that. Think about it. What's their motivation? I think we are sliding further and further into disinformation, distraction, pieces of accurate information being overwhelmed with spin and control. And I don't think it bodes well for going forward. I I think that there's reasonable evidence, as Joe said, that if you look at the total amount of black budget information, money that's been spent by the GAO that's unaccounted for, you're not buying gold toilet seats for Jetstar aircraft to fly politicians around it. You're talking about deep, unbelievably well-funded, decade-long research and development. Will's got his hand up. I want to let him speak. I don't want to monopolize everything. Go ahead, Will. You are muted.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, I just want to mention here that in regards to the technology, even if you had a ship, one of their ships sitting right in front of you, there's nothing in the physics books that tells you how this thing works. Okay, you won't find it. It was there 150 years ago. The technology on how to do this, we should have had UFOs 75, 100 years ago. Okay, but the physics that tells you how to do this, it was taken out. It was removed.
There's one aspect, and I can verify this. Back in the early 1980s, there was an MIT. They were writing to a one cubic inch crystal, okay, using a three-dimensional laser array. But the problem was the lasers that they had access to that were powerful enough and controllable were gigantic. It took a major optical table, and that they'd be able to do this. But to get it down to the scale of a 5 1/4 disk drive, they had to wait until 2005 for an enabling technology to come along. They came out with the blue laser. Remember blue laser, blue disk technology? That blue laser was still not quite perfect. They had to wait for the green laser, which was a little bit more powerful. It was a diode. So the technology, even though they could do this thing at a certain scale, they had to wait in order to get it down to a point where it became a usable device. And I can tell you right across the board, that is the same with every breakthrough. There's things that on the theoretical scale is proven in theory, but until they can prove it technically with the hardware and the software, it's not a usable device. So I think that may be what you're talking about, William. I don't think they had the technology available to enable it. And that's all the technology. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but it's simpler than that.
Well, if it was simpler, they would have
It's
done
a
it.
lot simpler.
I think it would.
This stuff isn't that complicated. It's not, because what we're working with is something called negative energy. And what is negative energy? Well, it's energy that's time reversed. It just works opposite of regular energy. This stuff isn't tough. It's really not that hard. Okay, we should have had this decades ago. Okay, it's not based on technology.
We did have it
We had
decades
the
ago.
technology decades ago to do this, but guess what? It wasn't in the physics books. They took it out.
But the
Okay.
military had it. They've had it all along.
Yeah, but they don't get it. They don't get it because it's not in any physics books. You can't pick up a physics book today that tells you how to do anti-gravity. It's
bet you-
simple. It's very simple. It's not hard to do this stuff.
It's in their physics
But it was
book.
taken out. It was taken out. It's when they made the zero vector zero. But guess what? It isn't. That's what Tom Bearden exposed that. When was that? Decades ago.
Did he come up with the patents? Did he come up with drawings of exactly how it works? Or is it just, hey, we got this and that's what it is?
He spoke about it in his lectures.
Hardware.
If you look at his patent, the Meg, you won't find it there. The Meg was just cleverly disguised. Okay. You know, he would not really expose or show people out there in the open what's going, because I asked him one time during a Bearden lecture 25 years ago. I went to one of his lectures, and I was asking him about this technology, and he turned to me like this. He says, "Don't ever ask me that question again." That's how guarded he is about this tech, because he wanted a big DARPA contract that never happened. Because these guys, they don't get it. It's not in any textbooks. You won't find it anywhere. Okay? That's just the way it is.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm from Missouri. I need to be shown something. And I've had my own experiences, but even there, without the hard evidence in hand, it's really hard going and telling people what you've seen or what you believe if you can't demonstrate it in the physical sense.
Well,
Okay.
the other thing too, if you think about it, is we could be slave to private industry, or the kingpins of industry. Because let's face it, back in the 30s, Schoberger came out with a way to with the repulsion, and again, anti-gravity. And he was brought into the U.S. His brain was picked, and they sent him back to Germany, where he returned, poor. Tesla is the same way. He
Sure.
demonstrated free energy. Okay. And when he died, before the corpse was even cold, they were in his lab ripping everything off. Okay, because they didn't want that to be public knowledge. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having half the issues we'd have now. It's all about making the almighty dollar that industry wants to get their hands on, and they hold on to it. That
Well,
could be the other side of the
that's my
coin.
point exactly, that the money drives the bus, and when they can sell conventional arms, they're not going to stop this game we have going on all over the world, mutilating
Exactly.
people. And think of how many wars they got going on right now, and who's making money hand over fist. We leave 88 billion in Afghanistan after 20 years. Oh, we'll just go buy more to replace it. I mean,
Sure.
this is exactly the paradigm. I can remember my dad saying, if you invented an umbrella that didn't turn over in high winds, the guys that have all the millions of umbrellas in their warehouses and sell them are going to fight like hell to squash you like a bug until they sell everything they can, and they run that horse to the end of the racetrack. And that is really, I think, part and parcel. Why would why did they take all of for example, there's a million examples. Why did they take the best trolley system in North America out of Southern California and put buses in that ran on diesel in the 30s? Because General Motors lobbied them to do it. Right. And to this day, that they destroyed a great mass transit system. Well, that's a perfect example. Why did J.P. Morgan and Westinghouse say, "What do you mean you're going to give this energy to everybody?" When he burned up the power station in Colorado Springs when Tesla in 1899. Well, he said, well, because, and all they had to say was, we'll meter it at the user end of it, and it would have been the end of the discussion. But Morgan didn't want to impact all its copper mines and all its copper sales, and so on and so forth. So, Westinghouse didn't want to put the generating with Edison in jeopardy for the DC power generation. So it all comes back to control and manipulation, and as John said, lie and deny, keep it out of the public realm. How many people, I mean, the guy in El Paso who had mysteriously had a one-car accident, had a Karen Silkwood moment. How many documented I listened to NPR in the early 80s. I was an old NPR PBS guy, started with PBS. They did an in-depth report on all things considered about an Australian company that had developed a two-cycle engine with fuel injection, which was getting 150 miles a gallon in a 2,000-pound car, documented over 200,000 kilometers. It was going to revolutionize, and this was in 1980, I guess it was 79 or 80. Well, that was the last you ever heard of it, because Ford bought the patent and stepped on it. And so there are many, many, many descriptions of this type of control, and it's all about selling things and making money and controlling, because most people don't give a rat's ass about anything we're talking about. It's really irrelevant to them. Look at the impact of the airline industry. If you had, and by the way, you talk about antigravitics. It's been disclosed there is a plasma generator on the leading edge. I do a lot of aviation documentaries on the stealth fighter and the B-2 bomber, which increases the lift. So they run a voltage across the front of that wing, and it enhances the lift on the wing. And it's an interesting beginning application of the type of things that we're talking about in terms of antigravitics without going into any detail. I'll turn it over to someone else.
Okay, since we've got onto the topic of electrogravitics and some of these other technologies, electrogravitics in 1997, a Russian physicist actually got a return of 5% on energy that was put in and reducing the weight of something using electrogravitics. Okay, now the problem is if you don't get to the 50% return, it's not cost effective. You're putting in more energy than you're getting that return on. Now, what Bruce is saying is true. In around 2000, they sent up an experiment. NASA sent up an experiment using the same type of an approach that they were using with electrogravitics, find out how it could be used. Now, the results of that were never published. However, later on, as Bruce said, they're now using it on the leading edge of the B-2 stealth bomber. Now, but again, using that for a lift and a propulsion system, they are still probably, if they're there, it's in such black area that we won't see it for another 20 or 30 years. Or they are not there yet, and they're still experimenting, trying to get a decent return on investment. When I'm talking about return on investment, I'm talking about energy put in and power, what you can do with the power that's being put in and how you're generating that power to take it with you. Same problem with our EVs. The electric vehicle is not efficient. Contrary to what you're told, it is not efficient. And it may not be efficient until they can fix the problem with the batteries. And the batteries is a major problem. When I was with BAE, Ford came to us because their batteries in their EV, their Volt, were catching fire and exploding. They asked us if we could do something about it. We looked at the situation, said, no, we're not going to touch that because the technology was not there yet. And I keep stressing that if you don't have the technology, you're not going to get the breakthroughs that you'd like to see. Okay. Now, what I'd like to do is if we can kind of get back on topic, the original topic of the disclosure. Maybe this fits into it. Maybe this is part of it. But I'd kind of like to bring things back to that point just to stay on topic.
Will, you had your hand raised. Do you want to add something real quick before we
Oh, yeah.
steer off that siding and get back on the main line?
My comment is don't confuse electrostatics with anti-gravity.
Electrogravitics. It's different.
There was a lot of work done in that area. I don't know, 25 years ago. NASA proved that electrostatics is not anti-gravity. Okay.
Electrogravitics I'm talking about. That's a different animal. It's a different animal.
Well, electrogravitics.
Okay, I'm not meaning to start a conversation on science of electrogravitics or the other ones.
Well, I've done work in that area. I'd like to
save that for another. I think we can save it for probably another and dedicate a whole topic, the whole night to it. We can all come prepared with all of our goodies and show all the stuff we have. Right now, we're talking anecdotally, and I think that we're getting a little off track because of that. Okay, so I apologize, but I'm going to just try to get us back on the track that we started on. Would anybody like to get back into that area? Or am I going to be voted down? We're going to do this democratically?
I can tell you an interesting story.
Okay, go ahead, John.
My cousin, I think I've said this in the past, he was a space shuttle navigator. Didn't get to go up because the Columbia whatever blew up and he was the next crew up. But he was a 2-star general in the Air Force, worked in the defense industry. And the whole time I'm with MUFON, I'm telling him about all the stories, physics book 370, all these things. He'd laugh. He'd just break out laughing, right? He passes away 3 years ago, and his brother, who was NSA, he says, John, Frankie was the father of a branch of the Space Force. I said, get out of here. He goes, no, I worked with him on it. So I look it up. There he is, Frank Casarino. He was the father of the branch of the Space Force. So he was part of this all along, kept it absolutely quiet for me. But there was one thing he told me. He said, John, he said, you don't ever have to worry about Russia and China. He said, we have stuff that you wouldn't believe. You can sleep good at night. So, in a way, I think he was telling me that, we've back engineered this stuff. We got it, and you look at the X-37B. I'm watching television in 2012, headline news, and there it comes in, 26-foot space shuttle comes in and lands on an aircraft carrier. This was right after Obama had said that we were shutting down the space shuttle and challenged them to be bolder and bigger. Well, that space shuttle was in space for 3 years, remote control, went right over everybody's head. But we had it, and it was out there. And it turns out we've had that since 1999, remote controlled space shuttle. But yet we're still launching this 300-foot space shuttle or whatever it was, So, my cousin told me we got stuff. And I think that stuff was back engineered because he was in the Air Force.
Yeah, good points. Who would like to come in next?
Well, who's going to pick a date when they're going to come out and say they're here or they're crawling across the White House lawn?
That'll be great. I would like to see that.
That'll be a false flag.
Yeah,
I'm telling you, it'll be a false flag. That'll be us. And you look at it, like you guys mentioned Mellon and the Mellon, Westinghouse, all these other big shots from 100 years ago, Carnegie, right? So they're there to make money and they feel they're godlike and they control everything, right? So what's the difference today with Musk and Zuckerberg and all the others? These billionaires, Klaus Schwab, Soros, they feel that they're godlike because their money could just do whatever. So I don't think much has changed with that. But I think that this whole social engineering now from progressives, and I hope Trump slaps them down in November because he's going to change all of that if he can win, and I hope he does. Part of their plan is going to be that false flag, the UFO. There it is, right over LA, right over New York. It's ours. It's the one we've had for the last 20 years. It's ours. Of course, we don't meet them. Maybe they show us on a screen. Who knows? But they're going to give us some message to change everything. The way we do it is this one world government. You got to put the UN in charge with one leader, no religion or one religion, one military, everybody, socialism to the max, share everything. My 5-bedroom, 3,800 square foot house is going to have 8 immigrants in it, and I'm going to be in a studio apartment because that's fair. I think it's a false flag, and I think that's exactly what's going to happen at some point.
Yeah. Okay, Bruce.
Because I don't trust them.
Well, I don't either, but I think the population, like you see in these horror movies where you get the whole town carrying torches, imagine half the country carrying torches going to Washington saying, okay, we're sick of being treated like a bunch of idiots. We are intelligent. Okay, we can make our own decisions. I don't need Uncle Sam to tell me what to think and how to think and when to think. So we want you now to come out and tell us what the hell is going on. And I think that's going to happen because people are getting disgusted of being played like a fool.
I know there was a poll, worldwide poll. They found out the majority of people in the world are unhappy. Big surprise there. Bruce, what do
you think?
Well, like I said, I do a lot of research and try to be as objective as possible. Here's my take on it. I think that since the Vietnam era, we have, as I interviewed a gentleman who wrote a very in-depth look, as crazy as this sounds, and this is not far afield because I think it speaks directly to the point that was just made. Um, that the agenda of communism to take down the West and capitalism was about a 20-step plan, 20 items. And I have to tell you, this was right after the wall came down, and he said, look, you think it's over? It's not over. He looked at the speeches, the pamphlets, the written documentation. The items in there today resonate, I think, with anybody objectively. Destroy the nuclear family, make the state the mommy and daddy of the children, inculcate the education system. You go back to John Rockefeller, who really was a very evil man with the rest of those clowns back around the 1900s, who was the one that instituted standardized learning. And his statements in writing and in speeches, I'm not interested in raising and educating people who can think. I need to educate people who can conform. That was the modus operandi of standardized education. You put people in that have been inculcated with the doctrine of equal outcomes, not equal opportunities, and all of the stuff we see manifested, in my opinion, feel free to disagree with any of this, to the nth degree in wokeism and alternative lifestyles, to the point of now pedophilia is working its way into the mainstream. You take all of the traditions, the founding fathers, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and spin them in the populace's mind of being bad and tear down statues, and the founding fathers were racist, manipulators, and so on. Whether you agree with any of that or not, having worked as an adjunct professor and having taught in K through 12 for about 10 years as a substitute, I got to see a snootful of blue ribbon School of Excellence education in this country in very, very, number one household per capita county and number three back and forth in Hunterdon County, New Jersey. And I got to tell you, they don't teach young students how to have any discernment or any critical thinking. So let's go back to that original statement. I gave you groundwork that I think objectively I could substantiate. Our generation, older people, are definitely fed up with this crap. We've sat on our hands. We've let it go. It's the old go along to get along routine, including through COVID, no matter what you say. Now it's all coming out what really happened there. But young people are so brainwashed, and I hate that's a dramatic word, but are so conditioned, and I'm actually working on a book about conditioning, to believe that this is normal and standard and don't know any different, that I don't believe you're going to have a groundswell of people that said, I've had enough for manipulation. I mean, look at the man on the street interviews, the person on the street interviews, everybody from college students to middle-aged people that know nothing about our history, know nothing about the way our government works, know nothing about anything because they're distracted, they're self-absorbed, and I'm painting everyone with the same brush. It's not fair and it's not obviously accurate. But my feeling is no. I think that we have been developed over the last 20 or 30 years to not ask the hard questions, to not stand up for right and wrong. There's no gray area in right and wrong. That it's not this rampant relativism. So I think we're in a grave danger of not having a groundswell to turn this ship around. And I think it's gone so far that there's a lot of people on the take monetarily, and there's no better way to coerce someone to change their values. I can remember my father saying, human beings have an unlimited ability to rationalize any behavior. And you throw a little money at them, and guess what? That's exacerbated. So I hope to God I'm wrong. I would welcome anybody's disagreement with my assertions here. But I observe things very critically as a documentary producer, and I am strongly of the opinion that we have a younger generation that just doesn't exist on the same wavelength that we were raised to. And they'll go along with this crap. They'll go along with the 15-minute cities. They actually believe. Musk himself came out and said, you got to drive one of our Tesla S models to 103,000 miles before it even begins to break even on carbon footprint. Well, Jesus, the battery pack is shot by then. The car's coming apart at the seams because it's all made out of plastic and half-assed. So they're
The best out of all of them.
well, and the point is, on every level, $4 billion was allocated at the beginning of the Biden administration to put charging stations every 50 miles along the interstate. To date, I just saw a report, 4 stations have been built, a total of 24 cars can be, 4 stations, the money's gone. This grid can't handle it. The power consumption, you listen to the American Trucking Association president testify in front of Congress. These electric tractor trailers, 8,000 pounds of batteries, they get 140 miles out of it. Then they got to charge for 10 hours. It costs you $70. It takes down the tear weight of the vehicle goes up. So it's a disaster 6 ways to Sunday. So my point is, I don't think people our age, people, of a like mind, there's a lot of them out there across America. The old portrait or the old poster that I used to have hanging up many, many years ago when I was in Denver working in news had the elitist view of North America. It had New York in prominent side and California on the other side of it, and a great wasteland of idiots in between. And that's how it was depicted. I don't think that that's the case, but I think that young people have very different value systems and they view the world much differently, good, bad, or indifferent, than we ever did. And I don't know that you're going to have that groundswell. Enough said. I'd like to hear if other people agree or disagree with that.
Okay, we have about 3 minutes left. Now I'll keep the bridge up longer if we want. But let's do a round robin. Who's next? Stan, you have your hand off.
Yeah, you brought up a good point there, because I think people today want someone else to ask the hard questions. Period.
Amen to that.
Okay, John, I think John had a.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it's all been by design for the last 30 years or so. And you look at how much changed in just 3 years under Biden. And can you imagine what would have happened to this country if the conservatives didn't have the Supreme Court? Can you imagine? And let's say it was true they harvested votes 4 years ago. Right now, you got welfare officers signing up every immigrant they can get their hands on. No social security number, no citizenship, no nothing. These people are dangerous, and their goal is to fundamentally change this country. If we collapsed, what do you think happens to Europe and the whole rest of the world? Look at what Putin has done. Look at what these countries. We're the only thing that keeps the world from going crazy, falling apart. And that's their plan. They want to destroy everything so some people can be in charge because they got the most money.
Mindy, how about you? Why don't you weigh in on all this?
Well, I feel like we're not being valued. We're being farmed like animals. And I'm afraid that that the slaughterhouse isn't far from our future. And we live in scary, dangerous times. And, it's going to take an act of God to put things right. And I'm hoping for that.
Amen. Amen to that. Okay, William, how about you? What do you got? On the subject, what's your take on it? Briefly.
Okay. What would you like me to talk about?
Okay. Somehow I got voted down on going. And I think where we're at right now is kind of railing about the situation today, whether it's the cost of these charging stations that are ineffective. Also the fact that, perhaps our young people aren't quite in tune with what's going on.
Right.
And, we're at the end of an era. Okay.
Right. Well, they want us in a little box. They want all of humanity controllable in a little box.
Yes.
And
Well put.
personally, I know otherwise. So, and so I realize what they're doing, what they're trying to do, or what they're accomplishing here.
Yep.
And
Good points. Good points. Uh,
no matter how you look at it, what I'm proposing, it just simply takes a lot of money to do it. And the question is, are there people out there willing to take that chance to break out of the box? I don't know.
okay.
I think there's somebody out there.
That's a good question. It's a good question. Okay, who hasn't weighed in yet? Bill Weber.
Sir. Well,
Sure.
to answer Will's question, we're in a bond. If you look back in history, we've been in several boxes. There was technologies presented to pull us out of those boxes, but the government got their little grimy hands on that to keep us in the boxes, and here we are today.
Well, I guess I have the last say. I'm going to limit myself to a minute and a half. First of all, I think right now, based upon what's going on, if we look at the big picture and we look at the things that are absolutely critical, food. Okay, the weak point in this whole conversation is food supply. Okay, the food supply has now been drastically reduced because there's been over 100 fires in the past year in major food production facilities. I've been talking about millions of chickens being roasted alive and cows being wiped out. Now these are intentionally set fires too. So the question is, why is it being done? Well, if you have no food and the only people that have food is the government, now you have control. What we're talking about really is control. So if we're going from one analogous maybe to going to the industrial revolution from an agrarian society to an industrial society. Now we're going to the information age society. And we're also going to artificial intelligence. And we're basically made ourselves pretty much obsolete. So I think therein lies the problem. The solution, I don't know what the solution is. I don't know if it's a money solution, but I think where we're at is just we're at a crossroads in history. So sleep on that and come up with a solution. John, okay, last word.
Real quick, just an announcement. I'm bringing back the Philly MUFON conference in Bucks County at the Sheridan, November 1st and 2nd. If anybody wants a vendor table, Bill Weber for your books, anybody else, just let me know. And on a real sour note, Jan Harzan was convicted on 2 charges Thursday and is awaiting sentencing.
For what?
Was that the child endangerment or whatever it was?
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
But I'll tell you this. He told me 6 months ago he was set up. He wouldn't admit he went for it because they checked his computer, saw he was doing this, and they set him up. And this is all part of what Elizondo said. He wants to destroy ufology, and it should be run only by the government. And don't be surprised if they get Dave McDonald next. You know, he runs that thing in the sky where they have those orgies. He's going to take a fall also. And he's got Wait
a minute. The guy that's head of MUFON now?
Yeah.
He's running orgies in the sky.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
it came down to one vote. I would have been the international director of MUFON. Then they discovered what he was doing. John Schuessler sent me a packet. He would send me just old stories. And right in the middle, there it was, a story about Dave McDonald and the Mile High Club. And he wanted me to say something about it. And I didn't. They had their chance to choose. They chose him. Now they got him. I'm telling you, they're going to take him down next. He also was running a resort in the Bahamas and hiding taxes. It was a tax haven. They're going to take him down next. Elizondo said he's going to blow up ufology. And, Harzan did what he did. But trust me, they found out what he was doing and they set him up. And what he told me was he was set up. He wouldn't tell me anything else.
That's interesting, John. Thanks for the update on that. That's fascinating.
Here is the book. We were talking about cover-ups. This is written by me, and the co-author is George Filer in this book. So we have some interesting stuff that we talk about. We actually have actual radar tracking on this stuff and the denials. So it's available on Amazon.com. It's also available on BarnesandNoble.com. You can get it in 3 flavors: Kindle, paperback, or hardcover. And I'll be setting up a table, John, in November to do book signings and such.
Yeah. Okay. No problem.
Hey, John, yeah, send whatever information you have on, that the conference.
Yeah, I will. I mean, I've got most of the speakers. I've just, we got Paul Hynek. We got Nick Pope. I'm going to go with Frank Chili. I'm saving Bruce and yourself. Right now, you're like my backup, but you'll speak next year. But we brought the conference back, so it'll be good.
Good. That's great.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
that'll
was
be
a good,
great.
good conference.
Yep. Looking forward
How
to
are
it.
you able to overcome the cost of the meals and things?
Well, they changed management again, and now they're reasonable except for dinner. So we're not doing the dinner. We're going to do a nice hors d'oeuvres Friday night, the cocktail hour, and we're going to end the meeting Saturday, and you're on your own for dinner at that point. And then that probably saves us a sleeping room for a lot of people too, because Fred and I, we're going to drive back, and Ray Keller will be with us. And that's 3 rooms right there. We don't need the other sleeping room other than for a couple of people that got to fly out in the morning, unless they want to leave later Saturday night.
Right.
But they changed hands again. And now the prices went up about 20% instead of 300%.
Yeah. Yeah. That was
I even got even the sleeping room rate, 129. That's less than we were paying previously.
exactly. Exactly. Okay.
Good
Well,
for you.
that's all I have. We will be having our next meeting will be the last Sunday of July. And I'll be sending out the notification and all. We'll let you know what it's going to be on, and thank you all for participating.
Yes.
A
Thank
lot
you
of
all.
fun, lively group. Okay. So, okay. Anyways, I think signing off at this point.
Thanks, everyone. Be
Thank
safe. Have
you.
a good
Thank you,
4th of
everyone.
July. Have a good holiday, huh?
Have a
See
good
ya.
holiday, everyone.
Be
Take care.
safe.
See you here.
Bye.
Bye now. Okay.